Welcome back, everybody. This episode, we'll be talking about the alternate economy. Part two, a further look or further looking at what is possible. I did do a video on this idea to uh, the basic premise being to separate ourselves from the main economy that we have in the country today in order to free ourselves from the basic slavery that we have become used to due to the taxes and the low wages, the unions, and the monopolies that really are in every facet of our economy today. So I wanted to take another look now that I've done some more research and seen some new things. So here we go. So I first really heard the idea from Forba, who started Gab, and recently, over the past few months, anyways, is when I noticed it, when I found it, talking about starting an alternate economy to kind of pull the rug out from under the corporations, big tech, big pharma, and the out of control spending that we're seeing in the government today. So he put forth the idea using Gab kind of as the main platform for free speech and the spreading of information. So that was his his solution to the big tech situation. And he's been pushing, or maybe pushing's not the right word, but he's been portraying Bitcoin as a possibility for that alternative currency or alternate currency. Sorry, I'm kind of skipping over my words here. Um, he's also pointed out owning our own businesses, our own banks, and kind of doing what we can to establish institutions to replace the ones that we are forced to rely on today that work to subvert our republic, our faith, our freedom, our rights, and giving ourselves that opportunity to truly support what we actually believe in. Um, he's also adding some new features to Gab upcoming. I don't know a whole lot about them. I believe one was a marketplace, and I don't know if he's going to be using only Bitcoin for that, or if it's going to be a place where you can use maybe, well, knowing the record that companies have in persecuting his company, I don't know if we'll be able to use PayPal or credit cards or whatever to use on there. We'll have to see. So the general idea is just to separate ourselves from the economy that we're forced to partake in now when we want something. If we take a loan from most banks, you look at those banks, they're owned by greedy, terrible people who donate to other greedy, terrible people, and it's been a mess ever since big banks popped up shortly after, and even before the revolution. The Bank of England was a big player in things. So being able to separate ourselves from that would give us greater leeway to live our lives and not support the evils of the day. So some of the new issues, and I think I touched on this in the last video, is that when you put out any cryptocurrency, with Bitcoin being the main one, it's so volatile that it's hard to envision it as a true currency. For instance, I think it was in 2018, Bitcoin was trending at about $2,500 or something like that per coin. And now it's 2021, and as of today, it was over 58,000 per coin when I last looked about an hour ago. In between there, it's gone up and down with major crashes, and some people are predicting that it could go as high as $100,000 per coin, which is great as an investment if you have some disposable income and you want to know toss it in there and see what happens. You're okay losing it if you lose it, and if it goes up, then you get more. That's great. But I just have a really hard time seeing how that can become a stable form of payment. What's worth $1 today could be worth $100 tomorrow, or it could be worth absolutely nothing. So, granted, I don't have a real good understanding of how cryptocurrency works. So take that for what it's worth. But through my limited research, that's what I've found. One of the reasons that Bitcoin is promoted is because it runs on the blockchain technology, which again, I'm not real well versed in. I like the idea of what it might be able to do, but basically what it comes down to with cryptocurrencies is it's all run over technology and the internet. And all of those things, no matter how secure they might be or independent they might be, there's an off switch for all of them. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Whether there's an actual switch you can press or code that could break it, I don't know. But there is a way to do it, which could leave us vulnerable. And once a Bitcoin's gone, it's gone. So if you invested in it, you're out of luck. I've been seeing stuff now that if you're making money, the government wants their piece of it. So there are talks, I believe, ongoing, and as far as I know, there's nothing imminent. But you can bet that eventually either the government will come up with its own cryptocurrency or else the IRS will find a way to tax it. So in the short term, you could maybe get away with, with it being unlegislated, but eventually it's going to, I don't see how it will not be. Now, there are smarter people than me who have been around it for a lot longer who say that that can't happen, but it just seems logical that it can and ultimately will in some shape or form. So when I was also talking about the off switch, one of the things that is kind of staring at us right now is a very aggressive China and their stance in the world, which they also hold a massive amount of our massive debt. And China I don't know how the international loans work, but if China were to call in the loans, I don't know what would happen as far as how we would go about paying them, how we'd be expected to pay them, what would happen when we can't pay them. I know that it's a fact and not a conspiracy theory that back in 2016, Hillary Clinton and her team were exploring options with the Chinese to sell land and mineral rights to China from our western states. I know that hasn't been talked about, but as far as I know, that was never really shut down outside of the fact that Trump ended up winning that election. For an instance, as to China's influence here and China's holdings here, longtime senator, and I believe he was maybe the minority or majority, I can't remember how many times it switched back and forth, but Harry Reid from Nevada, his family has a ton of ties to the Chinese and were very instrumental in building a Chinese-funded solar farm in Nevada. So the Chinese are already here. They're already heavily invested. They own a lot of our debt. They're pushing our weak government around right now. And should they push us into a war or confrontation, that off switch could be an EMP device. I'm not sure that I've read anything about China having them, but I believe we know that Russia has them. And if Russia has them, China probably does as well. So just think about that. We get into a war, we're being persecuted at home, our rights are being taken away and assaulted. We're counting on this alternate currency to keep ourselves going, and all of a sudden, boom, the lights go off. And then we've got nothing. So everything has an off switch. And I think that needs to be taken into account when looking at alternate ways to fund an economy or a way of life. So as I was looking at it and trying to find more information about how we could do this, if there were better ideas, worse ideas, I guess I was in my knowledge and my research, have always been a proponent of the gold standard. There's a limited amount. If everything's backed by gold, it has value and a promise of value. After some more research into how the big banks, the Federal Reserve, and the banking families are able to manipulate money, the printing of money, the value of things, depressions, inflations. It's really interesting when you start to read more about how the Federal Reserve works, what it controls, how it controls it, and how the central banks have been controlling things. And it's not a conspiracy. You don't have to feel like you need the tinfoil hat on. It's just looking at how things work, how these people move, who they know, and where the agreements are made. And it seems like they could control, if they don't already, the vast majority of gold, which again would give them control over the monetary system, which further causes us to be enslaved to whatever ideas or policies that the rich make up for us. So while the gold standard might seem like a good idea, in principle, maybe it is just making the problem a little more, maybe a little smaller, but it's not solving the problem. So in doing research, I came across silver and how at the beginning of our republic, there was a lot of argument between the first couple of central banks and the government and the people about silver as a currency. Silver is more common. It was easier for people to use. It still holds value. And it was standing in the way of the central banks controlling the gold, which controlled the economic system. And this video is getting a little long, so I'm going to try and hurry it up a little bit here for you guys. But there's a possibility with more research that further minting true silver, not this, like, I should have looked up how much silver is actually in a quarter or a dime or nickel today, but it's not much. There's very little actual value to those. So maybe pure silver could be more of an answer to an alternative economy than, say, Bitcoin or gold. So just an idea. And my own personal preference has always been that currency in hand is the way to go. Again, digitalized stuff can be turned off. If it's through a bank, the bank doesn't like you, doesn't agree with you, the bank can turn it off. The government finds fault with you, they can take your funds away. You can be hacked and those can all go away. There's just so many different things that can happen with the digitalized currency, whether it's credit card, debit card, Bitcoin, whatever. There's always an off switch. So definitely I need to do more research to be able to put forth more concrete ideas on my own side, but these were just ideas that I thought were worth talking about when also considering Bitcoin and what I think, Torba's onto a really good idea, and I think we need to go that route if we can, but I'm just not sold that Bitcoin is the way to go. So to me, if you've listened to any of the other videos that I've done, if you have, thank you. If not, maybe you want to give them a try, or maybe you want to just avoid them. Try and this is a work in progress, so I know that there's much room for improvement. But I keep talking about community as being the answers to many of the problems. And if you can form that community, then in amongst yourselves, you might be able to allay some of the costs of living, whether that's bartering for meat for vegetables or goods and services. There's a lot of things I think that could be done in amongst yourselves that could lower the cost of living and lower your dependency on the government, that could make you more self-sufficient. And I completely agree with Torba about starting our own options. And if you have your community, then you can start to develop those options. If there's enough of you, it may make sense to be able to start a bank. In my area, there is a Catholic credit union. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to sign up with them yet, but at the earliest opportunity, once I do a little more research into them, I plan on moving my accounts there. So putting that option in place, and if you've got enough people with enough diverse ideas and passions, you can start making inroads there, whether that's banking, whether that's woodworking, building, auto repair, medical services, you name it. If you can start building a community, then there'll be more options out there for you to have your own little economy. And my last video talked a little bit about how and where to start a community, to how to go about getting that together. So if you want to check that out for those ideas, I really think that that's the way we need to go. And it's not going to happen overnight. Maybe it's too late, but as far as I'm concerned, the only time it's too late is if you never started at all. So I'm going to continue trying and looking for the right place, looking for the right people, looking for the right ideas that would help us be successful. And I'll be sharing my ideas with whoever wishes to hear them. And hopefully it can spark those people to come up with better solutions and to make the right decisions for them. So I will leave it at that for today. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you found something valuable in here, and I will talk to you next week. God bless, and God bless the USA.